Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto. This is the C block or final section of our weekly roundup of cannabis news from around the world. One final reminder to remember to scan the QR code to take you right to the App Store or Google Play and download the PCM TV app. Next up is Virginia, where they continue to put forth an effort to bring adult use to that state, despite knowing their governor, Glenn Youngkin, continues to defy the will of his constituents and will veto any pro cannabis law that reaches his desk. But here's Joe Parsons in Virginia.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WV, and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. With all the big MSO companies that are currently in operation across America, there is one that really stands out. That's Green Thumb Industries. Not only are they doing rather well in Virginia, they are currently one of the most successful in the nation. GTI went public with their fourth quarter earnings, and unlike a lot of the other big MSO companies, they are thriving in an industry that is proven to be extremely difficult to achieve profitability and growth. They reported record high sales numbers in both medical and adult use markets. The chief executive officer and founder of GTI, Ben Kovler, was proud to report their growth progress and went on record to say, demand for THC in America is at an all-time high, and Green Thumb is well positioned to deliver on this opportunity. Meanwhile, alcohol consumption trends in America are not positive, as the Surgeon General recently warned of the harms of alcohol and its link to cancer. In contrast, cannabis is enhancing the well-being of tens of millions across the nation. For their fourth quarter earning, they had over $294 million in revenue. Cash flow from operations reached over $195 million, and an additional $172 million in cash from repurchasing $43 million of company shares. In Virginia, they're a great business partner, and they represent the district where I live, that is HSA Health Service Area 3. They have shown to be most interested in the possible retail market in Virginia, as under current guidelines, they're only allowed to operate 6 total locations in the Commonwealth. An adult use market would allow for even more growth potential in the entire Commonwealth and not just one region. And I know that I personally wish them continued success. Well, that's going to do it from this week from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WV in Charlottesville, and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Joe Parsons. Until next time, stay lifted.
With all the doom and gloom coming from the industry, there are still some exceptions to the downturn in fortunes. Take Massachusetts-based multi-state operator MaryMed. They are expanding and growing at a slow, controlled, healthy, and profitable manner. This week, they closed on an $11 million deal for a Delaware-based company. Here's Doug Miller, who is high on Wall Street and has some more insights on MaryMed.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's cannabis stock report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. MSO MaryMed has closed on its $11 million acquisition of First State Compassion Center in Delaware. The deal was made in July of 2023 and includes 2 medical cannabis dispensaries as well as cultivation and processing facilities. The FSCC acquisition adds to MaryMed's ongoing roll-up strategy, which included acquisitions in Maryland, Massachusetts, and Illinois. So let's see how MaryMed's stock chart looks. It's trading around 11 cents, and it's been pulling back, so keep an eye on it for that bottom so it can reverse back up. And be sure to trade smart and lock in those profits. The entire market's been a little choppy lately, so you have to trade them very, very smart right now. And that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Doug Miller.
In other news from Massachusetts, there's a retailer who owes the state over $420,000 in state taxes. Rebel, with 2 locations in Great Barrington and Boston, is challenging those controversial host community fees of 3%. Many cities and towns across the Commonwealth want those cities and towns to actually explain why those fees exist. They even have the nerve to ask the courts to ask city officials what they are doing with them. It's happened a number of times in the state, and some more friendly cities and towns are even eliminating them since they either don't want to account for what they are doing with those fees or they're using them for non-cannabis related businesses and activities. Another issue in the Bay State is the decline of the medical market. The Department of Health was originally overseeing the entire medicinal marijuana program from 2013 to 2018. When the Cannabis Control Commission was created after adult use was voted in by the voters in 2016, the rules changed for the medical market, and fewer and fewer people signed up for that program. So now that figure is down to just 90,000 patients. But compare that to a medical only state like Florida, where there are over 860,000 registered patients. ACS of West Bridgewater and Hall are now going to be dual licensed dispensaries after both towns allowed them to apply for an adult use license in addition to the medical only license they've been operating under since 2018. And now ACS is waiting for the Cannabis Control Commission to give them the green light to open their Hall location for adult use. Alan Casper is an outreach coordinator for ACS and explains how challenging it is to deal with the CCC and some of the regulations of operating a legal compliant business.
It's clear medical places are closing. It's clear that it's incredibly expensive to be medical as opposed to adult use. The number of adult use that have cropped up everywhere has made it even harder to compete. And also with the lab fraud, people, are just pouring sometimes contaminated, cheap product onto the market. So it's very hard to compete if you're, a vertically integrated, very compliant, very patient-oriented, concerned about quality dispensary.
In New York, there is a new type of license in that state that's going to interest plenty of companies that manufacture unique products who want to white label their products in the Empire State. So there's now a new license available called the Type 3 Branding License. This will allow out-of-state operators to get their products into one of the fastest growing markets in the country. When it comes to New York, one attorney has carved out a niche for his live show called Ask Me Anything About Cannabis. It's on Wednesdays. His name is Jeffrey Hoffman, and you can check him out on LinkedIn live at 4:20 p.m. Our New York correspondent is Pam Chmiel, and she talked with Jeff this week and, of course, asked him anything.
This is Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Pam Chmiel reporting from New York. Today we have Jeffrey Hoffman with us, a cannabis lawyer from New York, and he's going to talk to us about New York State's cannabis medical participation and how it's been declining and becoming an afterthought for lawmakers. Next week, medical advocates will rally in Albany on Tuesday, the state's capital, to push for changes to strengthen the program. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Thank you for having me.
Can you just tell us a little bit about the main goals of the rally in Albany next week and what you're hoping to accomplish?
Sure. So as often the case in every state that eventually goes adult use, the medical program becomes the bastard stepchild of cannabis in that state. Mm-hmm. We've seen declining numbers in New York's medical cannabis program. I think at the high water mark, there are about 150,000 folks with medical cards, and it's down closer to about 100,000 now. So we have several bills in front of the legislature that we're hoping that they will turn into law. 3 of them that we're going to be focusing on at our Medical Cannabis Lobby Day on Tuesday, March 11th. 2 of them are sponsored by the majority leader in the Assembly, Assemblymember Crystal Peoples-Stokes. One of which would require the medical health insurance providers that are completely funded by the state. These are entities like Workers' Comp and Epic. It would require them to cover medical cannabis as part of their offering, right? Right now in the state of New York, medical cannabis patients are pretty much entirely responsible for the cost of their medicine. We're not talking about the Aetnas or the Blue Crosses of the world. We do not expect them to get involved in this until federal legalization occurs. But in every state, there are a variety of state-funded health insurance entities. And of course, if they're funded by the state can require what it is that they cover. So the first bill that we're going to be promoting, it is one of the majority leader's bills, and it would require the state-funded health insurance entities here in New York to cover medical cannabis. The other bill that we will be focusing on that is sponsored by the majority leader would get rid of the medical cannabis excise tax here in New York. Best practice generally is that you do not make patients pay taxes on their medicine. Absurdly, that is something that many states do for medical cannabis. So this is really a very straightforward bill. We didn't even really create a dossier about it. It simply is the medical excise tax that exists currently, or medical cannabis excise tax that currently exists in New York. We eliminate it, right? So even if we don't get the health insurance bill, at least we can do something to help reduce the cost of the patient's medical cannabis. The third bill that we are working on, and this is a bill that I actually wrote in conjunction with Assemblymember Kellis, is for the creation of an endocannabinoid system awareness program in the state of New York. The vast majority of medical professionals in the United States were not taught about the endocannabinoid system in their medical training. Our numbers show only somewhere between 10 to 15% of medical schools teach about this. And this is a fundamental bodily system. Every vertebrae has one, right? So us, bears, dogs, cats, any animal that has a vertebrae, basically a backbone, has an endocannabinoid system. This is where the molecules of THC bind in your body. They're concentrated in your head and in your groin, where all good things are concentrated in your body. And this would create an awareness program about this system. It would provide education for all medical professionals. And we are going to do an enhancement to it that would make it part of the training that a doctor would have to take in order to be able to recommend a medical cannabis card, right? So this is not even a cannabis issue. This is a health issue. Now that cannabis is legal, you're going to have more and more people that are willing to speak to their doctor about it, more and more people that are going to present to medical professionals, either currently on cannabis or having taken cannabis in the recent past. And so this is a health issue, and we got to make sure all medical professionals have these educational resources. And those are the three bills that we will be promoting at our big press event on the $1 Million Staircase, which is where everybody does their press events in the Capitol in Albany on Tuesday.
Does insurance cover it in other states? And
no, this would be the first passed legislation that had that. That's right. There's other states that are attempting to do it. New Jersey is actively trying to do this as well, but whoever does it first will be the first.
This is Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Pam Chmiel reporting from New York.
This is, of course, National Women's History Month, and women continue to carve out a leadership role in the cannabis industry. There are women's specific trade shows, brands like Buy Weed from Women, growers from Humboldt County in California to Maine, and Kimmie Cannabis from Oklahoma brings attention to some other female superstars in the industry.
I am Kimmie Cannabis from Can I Talk About It with the Oklahoma Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Women are trailblazing in Oklahoma's cannabis industry, proving that this agriculture field is a space where they can build generational wealth for their families. From cultivation to advocacy, women are shaping the future of cannabis in business, health, and social change. Oklahoma women in cannabis are not just entrepreneurs. They are advocates for mental health and wellness, pushing back against outdated stoner culture stereotypes. Some, like Ebony Jones, one of Oklahoma's few cannabis-friendly ordained ministers, are even bridging the gap between cannabis and religion, a topic often met with controversy. The conversation around mothers in cannabis is also evolving. More women are speaking out about the effects of cannabis on expecting mothers and its role in helping women battle postpartum depression while managing the everyday highs and lows of motherhood. But the journey isn't without challenges. Misogyny and patriarchy remain deeply embedded in the industry. Laura Thorne highlights this reality, revealing she holds countless unsolicited messages and photos from men in the business. Mary Jane Porter adds, I can't even tell you the gross things I've experienced in this industry. But women staying strong and true to our personal and company missions are the ones on top. As Oklahoma's cannabis industry grows, so does the role of women in shaping the future. They are not just participants, they are leaders, educators, and change makers, ensuring cannabis remains a path to empowerment. That is it for this week's Oklahoma Cannabis Update. I'm Kimmie Cannabis with Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Peace, love, and all that good stuff.
And finally tonight, the story of a 66-year-old man in New Zealand called Gandalf. His real name is Paul Smith, and he is a caregiver in that country. A caregiver is a term for those who grow and share their product with medical patients who otherwise do not have access to the plant. This week, law enforcement in New Zealand raided the rural Northland property where Gandalf grew his medicine for others. These caregivers are called green fairies in that country, and they have existed in this role since medical cannabis was allowed in 2020. Unfortunately, many of the most needy patients need access to plant outside of the fees to find a doctor and prescribe the medicine, which is how that program is set up. Gandalf is now facing charges that could end up with an 8-year prison sentence. Protests have popped up in that country since the arrest, and now this case will move into the court system there. So while we all may complain about the rules, regulations, and taxes that croak the business, some countries are far worse than what is going on here in the United States. That'll do it for this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Consume it responsibly, and we'll see you next week.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Welcome to Pro Cannabis Media, your go-to for all things cannabis. PCM is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news and talk shows with a twist. We've got 16 state correspondents and multimedia journalists from around the US and Canada.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with Big Green Distribution with the Missouri Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Green Finger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Amy Carter from Michigan Weedsters.
Andrew Behringer here reporting from Washington, D.C.
Debbie Fazy with the Canadian Toke of the Week.
It all started back in 2018 when founder Jimmy Young kicked off the In the Weeds podcast. His mission? Documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition. Fast forward to today and we've got Cannabis Coast to Coast with Alaina Pinto, delivering the nation's only TV-style cannabis news show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast, PCM TV's weekly roundup of industry news from California to New York. I'm Alaina Pinto.
As of August 2024, PCM has racked up over 1.2 million views and 14.5 million impressions on our YouTube channel. With 15,000 subscribers and growing, our reach is spreading like wildfire. PCM's website, YouTube, Rumble, Discord, Roku, Twitch, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and even our very own PCM TV app. Get your cannabis news fix with Pro Cannabis Media. We're here to keep you informed and entertained. Stay tuned and stay lifted.